Well, good morning, everyone. It's really wonderful to have each of you here this morning, and I trust that you are going to be really excited about today's message. I was sent an email, or rather a message on social media just after our talk last month. And what was interesting for me was on that particular day, I had just been sharing about a moment like this one. And it was on the 25th of January. I had been sitting having a meeting with someone in MAP4LIFE area. Does anybody know where that is? It's in the east of Pretoria, for those of you not from here. And we were having a discussion, and I was talking to him about the kind of things that happen in life that you don't plan, significant things. And unknowing to me, something rather significant was happening at that time. It was the 25th of January, and an article had been published in the Hollywood Reporter. Now, some of you may have heard about Hollywood before. You may not have heard about the Hollywood Reporter, but nonetheless, there in this article that was written were the names MAP4LIFE and Glen McQuirk. And for me in that moment, it was kind of, how can a farm boy from the Eastern Cape be mentioned in the Hollywood Reporter without me ever entering into the country of America and without ever meeting the person who wrote the article? But nonetheless, for that person to make a claim that there was an actress that had become so successful in the world that she is now regarded as the most successful, or is it the most successful, the most well-known African actress in the world. And she relates a story. And the story is that she spent 3 years studying, doing something that the world expected her to do. And after 6 weeks of working, she felt as if she had been dead for those 6 weeks. And she wondered to herself, is this what I've got to do for the next 40 years of my life? And she was in a place of maybe desperation, perhaps. And she went back to her home country of Kenya, and while she was there, she was able to go through MAP4LIFE. And during that process, she wrote down something interesting. You know, because we have a process where you can work through all your different goals and narrow it down to your top 10. And her top idea that she wrote down was this: I want to be an actress. She actually said actor. But that was the conclusion she came up with. You see, she hadn't been allowed to do that because being an actress in Kenya was a frowned upon profession. In fact, people would say, you can't make money doing that. You better have a backup plan. Well, she made the decision to become an actress after going through MAP4LIFE. And within 8 years, incredible things have happened for her. In fact, in less than 3 years, she was able to act. Let me go further back a little bit. The first amazing thing that happened was she got a 100% scholarship to study at a university which you probably have never heard about, called Yale University. And before she finished her 3-year degree there, she wrote down the kind of movies that she wanted to make. And within 10 days of writing down the kind of movies she wanted to make, she won an audition for a movie called 12 Years a Slave, and later won an Oscar. She's better known than Charlize Theron. People know her. She's acted in Star Wars. She's been in The Jungle Book. She's been the Queen of Katwe. And on Friday, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, my family and I were able to go and attend the premiere of Black Panther with Lupita. right here in Montecasino. So I want to just say to you, on the Wednesday prior to the premiere, I was minding my own business in my home, and 5 o'clock that evening an email came in from New York, from the offices of Disney, inviting me and my family to the premiere here in South Africa. When we woke up that morning, we had no idea. Just like on the 25th of January, we had no idea there was something in that going to be in that article that day. I was attending a convention yesterday, an educators' convention. When I arrived there, the person who was running this conference, I think there were about 500 teachers, briefly introduced me. And I heard them talking about MAP4LIFE during the day and how they're going to really use this within their schools. They've got 700 schools around Africa. And I went to the back and I picked up a brochure because they've introduced a new career development program. And I picked this up and I took it home with me. And last night, when I was going through this brochure, I opened it and I see that. And what I want to say to you is that I had no idea that that was happening. You could talk about this being a miracle, perhaps. At least I see it like that, because I had nothing to do with this. And I want to tell you today, as I share this message, there are things that are going to happen in your life if you begin to expect the good thing instead of constantly focusing on the bad things. So I want to start reading a couple stories to you. And just to kind of set the scene, these stories are ancient stories perhaps because they have a biblical base. And some of them you might recognize, you may have heard. For those of you who've actually read through the Bible, you might know these stories. But I want to just share them with you because irrespective of where you come from, I think you'll be able to relate to these stories. Because there was a guy called Joseph. Do you know or have you heard about this guy Joseph? Well, let me tell you his story. Joseph woke up a prisoner ready to execute his daily routine. He'd been there for many years in prison. For those of you who know the story, he was sold off into slavery by his brothers. They wanted to get rid of him because they couldn't stand the dream that he had had. And here he was having this dream that he was in a place of authority, but the reality was he was in prison. So in the morning he woke up to do his normal prison routine as he'd become accustomed to, but by that evening he was the Prime Minister of Egypt. There's another person, Naaman. He woke up in the morning with leprosy. Now, you might know, we might not be familiar with leprosy today, but one of our members actually works for the leprosy mission here in South Africa, and she treats people with leprosy right now in the 21st century. And she's been doing that her whole life. When I say her whole life, over 30 years that she's been working with lepers here in this country. And she's based in Pretoria, by the way. So don't think leprosy is a thing of the past. This is still a reality today. But Naaman woke up in the morning with leprosy. But before the close of the day, he was healed and transformed completely. On a day like this, David woke up as a shepherd boy. And while he was out tending his father's flock, he was called. And before the sun set that evening, he had been anointed as king. On a day like this, there was a guy, Mordecai. Some of you may have heard of the story of Esther. And Mordecai was sleeping, he was sleeping at the gateway. But before the close of day, he had been honored in the palace. I don't know if any of you are relating to these stories, but there was a guy, Bartimaeus, who I've talked about once before. He woke up in the morning, he was blind. But that evening, he went back, he could see, because he had been healed. On a day like this, Daniel slept the night with a bunch of lions. Now, I don't know if you've ever, in the Eastern Cape where we come from, we talked about Ngonyama, these beasts outside there that will devour you. You know, you were scared of the lion. And there Daniel was. He spent the night there. And I don't know how long your faith can hold out. You know, at first the lion doesn't approach you, but by morning, I think you need a change of clothing perhaps. But there Daniel was in the den of lions, but when the morning came, he was prime minister. There was a woman that you can read about that woke up in the morning overwhelmed by debt and by threats from those people she owed her money to. But by the close of day, she had paid off all her debt and she was a rich person. Lazarus died and yet was raised from the dead. I don't know what circumstance you're in. If you maybe like the woman who was had an issue of blood, as it talks about. She had this never-ending period. For those of you who might understand menstrual cycle, and she woke up that morning with that same issue as it had been for many years, but that day she was healed. It was all on a day like today. Jabez cried out, and his territory was increased on a day like today. Elisha prophesied that tomorrow the famine that had been there for a long time would end. And the next day it had happened. All on a day like today. We can go and look at those stories and be inspired or motivated by them. But I think it's important for us to look at our situation on a day like this. And as those of you who've attended these talks before, you will know that I like to create a message that is maybe easy for you to remember. So I'm going to use those very words, on a day like this. And the first letter is O. And I want to tell you that on a day like this, your obstacles can become your opportunity. You can be sitting right now, staring at all of these obstacles and telling the world why you can't do something. And in an instant, you could look beyond the obstacle and see within it an opportunity to transform. You could be like the story I shared earlier, opening that filing cabinet innocently, looking inside there, and an idea is planted in your mind that can change people's lives. Your obstacle in the morning could have become an opportunity by the evening. What obstacles do you have? What opportunities lie hidden in the excuses that you are making? On a day like today, you could go from being newsworthy to noteworthy. There are people that are talked about in the news, and my grandmother used to always say to me, no news is good news. You know, back in those days we had to go to the city, which was 30 kilometers away, which took us a fair bit of time to get to buy a newspaper to at least know what was going on. I mean, today the phone is bzz, bzz, bzz all the time, and every bit of news that comes in is negative. And you might be consumed by the negativity that surrounds you. In fact, you become so accustomed to it that you've even set your alarm clock in the morning to go off in time so that you can hear the 6 a.m. news. And then just to make sure, you listen to the news again at 6:30, and then at 7 o'clock on your way to the office, you're listening to it again. And then you begin to repeat it to the first person you meet. You say something like this: did you hear? I want to tell you that for those people who feel that their life is newsworthy, in other words, it just feels negative. It feels like everything is going wrong, and everything that can go wrong seems to happen to you and no one else. I want to tell you that that situation can turn around in an instant. You can move from being newsworthy to being noteworthy. And that can happen for you today. It really can. You can sit there this morning and saying, yes, 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 I've heard these stories before. You don't know my situation. I don't care what your situation is. Those stories I read to you earlier are not things that have happened a long time ago, because there are similar stories that are happening right now today. I shared with you the story of Lupita acting as an outcast in 12 Years a Slave and going from that situation to Oscar. When she wrote down the kind of movies that she wanted to make, she had no idea that in less than 10 days, she would be appointed to act in a movie that would produce an Oscar. She had no idea that in less than 10 days, she would go from an obscure African person in the middle of Kenya to somebody that the world knows. She had no idea that at that point when she wrote that down, that she was going to be acting in Star Wars, in Jungle Book, in Black Panther, which I believe is going to be a movie that revolutionizes young people in Africa. Incidentally, she's producing a movie that tells Trevor Noah's story. Isn't that amazing? Who would have thought? You see, you can go from newsworthy to noteworthy. What about sensing that you are in an awful situation right now? a situation that just cannot be changed. I mean, you've convinced yourself that this is the end. The whole world is against you. And you feel that you're in an awful place right now. I want to tell you that being in that place of feeling awful could become a place where you are awesome. From awful to awesome. We have a story of a young man who was at the peak of his cycling career, mountain biking. I don't know if any of you are familiar with mountain biking. It seems to be the thing today. Everybody who can cycle wants to cycle off-road, not on the road anymore. And here he was, 16 years of age. I say he was at the peak because at that stage he was the number 1, number 2 cyclist in mountain biking in his age group. Incredibly well. Prospects lay ahead that were exciting. I can just imagine people there planning out and already seeing him as a 21-year-old or maybe as a 30-year-old doing incredible things in the cycling world. He didn't know that on that day he would break his back and be paralyzed. There he is lying in hospital in an awful situation. No hope for the future. And then his father comes and gives him a MAP4LIFE book that's all about goal setting. And he took it perhaps as an insult. He was feeling sorry for himself. My life is completely changed. But you know, after about 10 days of that book lying there, he picked it up. At the same time, there was a mountain bike race that he was watching on television. It was called the Cape Epic. I don't know if any of you have heard about it. They talk about the Cape Epic being like the Tour de France of mountain biking. And here's the interesting thing. He's lying paralyzed in hospital, but he writes down a goal. He writes down a goal that he wants to ride the Cape Epic. Now, in between him writing that down and being one of the youngest people to complete the Cape Epic a few years later, he had a car accident where he broke his leg. And when he rode the Cape Epic, so you can already realize that he recovered from his paralysis miraculously, he had an inch of bone missing in the top part of his leg, and he had a pin running from his hip right down to his knee. That's how he rode and completed the Cape Epic. When I met him for the first time, which is some time after, he had just written a book called The Race That Measures It All. And when I met him, he was as straight as you can imagine. I've never seen somebody walk so straight before. A short guy. And he came up to me and shook my hand. And I could see there was something of purpose within this young person. They decided their team was called One Life. And there they completed the Cape Epic. I want to tell you that it doesn't matter where you're at right now. You can be paralyzed from the neck down. But if you have a dream, if you begin to take steps, that dream can become a reality for you. See, on a day like today, you may have woken up in a state of despair. But I want to tell you that your despair could become your defining moment. I met a young man. When I say a young man, he was in his 40s, and he shared a story with me about picking up this book called MAP4LIFE when he was in Cape Town. He just returned from the United Kingdom, where he had been spending some time, and he was at a point where he was contemplating suicide, a place of despair, desperate despair. He picks up this book and suddenly decides to change. Instead of continue down this road that was heading towards suicide, decided to change his view. And today he's an anesthesiologist, saving lives. Your despair can become your defining moment. I don't know if any of you have ever had anxiety before, anxious about something. You know, they sometimes use the word worry, you know, and they even, on a daily basis, you might say, ek is bekommerd daaroor, I'm worried about, you know, you constantly reinforce this worry, worry, worry. Worry is simply the abuse of imagination. It's taking your imagination and looking at something that could go wrong and believing it. And then you begin to act as if it's going to go wrong. In fact, you begin to make it go wrong. That's what worry does. But you can turn your anxiety into achievement. I remember a person having an idea and being incredibly anxious about this business idea. You know, the language, the voice that was going on in their mind was, I don't qualify. There's nobody in my family who's ever done business before. I didn't do well at school. I speak the wrong language. They had all the reasons to justify why they should never, ever start a business of their own. But today they're running a successful business. You see, what I've discovered is that when you take action, all fear disappears. So the anxiety that's caused by fear just requires you to take a step of faith. Because when fear knocks and faith answers, no one's there. No one's there. On a day like today, that word that you use where you describe your past successes and you say yesterday or in the past, the yesterdays of your life should fade into insignificance and become yes, today. So instead of looking back all the time like so many people do, politicians love to do that, they keep looking back and reminding everybody of the past instead of saying, if we want to change, we have to say yes today. To stop looking back. Nobody drives a car like this. We look where we're going. And so you can literally turn the scars of your life into the story of a lifetime. Stop complaining about what happened to you. Start talking about what you're going to make happen. So on a day like today, your life can be transformed. On a day like today, you might feel lost. You know, when you look down the tunnel, all you see is darkness. You might feel it kind of, you're here sitting amongst other people, but inside, you feel completely and utterly alone. You feel there's no direction. But you know something? When you feel lost on a day like this, you could see light. I think of Peter, one of our members since 1999. I think of Peter sitting there in the Kruger National Park, receiving MAP4LIFE as a gift on that particular morning. Starting to go through the process. He does the very first exercise, which is to go through the wheel of life, to see what his life looks like. And he begins to evaluate every area of his life. And when he's finished doing the exercises, he notices that under spiritual, he has scored a big fat 0. On the Sunday morning, After he had written down some ideas, one of the ideas he wrote down was, I want to find, in fact the words he wrote was, find the meaning of life, as a result of his big fat zero. On Sunday morning he opens the Sunday Times, and right there in the center of the page is an advert, and the advert has a heading, and the heading is, find the meaning of life. Peter sees it as a sign. So he doesn't even ask any questions, he just signs up for the course. In March of the year 2000, he goes on this course, and his life is transformed. He finds the true meaning of life. And he's saved from eternal damnation into eternal life. You see, your situation that you feel is hopeless can be changed in an instant. You can move from lost to life. You might feel isolated. I don't know. I meet people that have, I was talking to Minard this morning. I said he's looking like he's on holiday. Because I know last year sometime he decided that he was going to retire. And fortunately, he didn't spell retire with an I, he spelled it with a Y. Maybe he needs to put an F and refire or something. I don't know, there's other ways of spelling that word. But there's so many people that move into a new season of their life and they feel isolated, they feel alone, they feel left, they feel neglected. And we see that today throughout South Africa, where people who are in their upper years in life, with all the wisdom that is there to make a change, that are being neglected. People who have made mistakes in their life that can teach you and I from their experience so that we can learn. We reject them and their wisdom. We lock them away somewhere, and we don't do that actually. They lock themselves away in many cases. And they isolate themselves. I want to tell you that you can change from being isolated to being an influencer. I'm too old to write. Some people might say, I want to say the words that you write in your old age could be the things that change the next generation. So stop isolating yourself. Maybe today, on a day like today, you can become an influencer. And how do you influence? You sow seed. How do you sow seed? You speak. You talk. You write. Without complaining. On a day like today, you could have a sense that you've been kind of knocked so much. You've been beaten about by the world system. There's just, you can't get up anymore. You've fallen down so many times that you just decided you're not going to get up. I want to say to you today that there's a principle to transform your life forever. All you have to do is start knocking. Because when you stand at the door and knock, people have a tendency to open. The obstacle that you face right now, the barrier, the barricade, the thing that's preventing you from stepping into your dream could simply be that you haven't knocked on the door. You're standing there looking through the clear glass, seeing the picture on the other side, but you, at the same time, are being held back because there's this barrier. You know what's exciting? When I go to these big shopping centers, especially in Cape Town, because they have a bit of wind down there, and they tend to put barriers at the entrances to the shopping centers, in the form of a glass door. And that glass door remains closed until you step within a particular radius or distance from that glass door. When you step into the sensor zone, the door opens and says, come in. And maybe you are in a place in your life right now where you're standing just too far back. The door looks closed. It looks locked. It looks like no business is happening. But all the while you can see through the glass, you can see a vision of who you should be becoming, but you're too afraid to step up to the door. I want to encourage you, if you feel knocked down right now, just start knocking. Because when you begin to knock, doors will open for you like never before. You might be in a place where I was talking to someone else, and they said they're in the departure lounge at the moment, you know, kind of next step flight to heaven or something. At least they were hoping, and it wasn't the big drop to hell. But you know, all of us at some point kind of sense there's an end. You know, I'm becoming so aware of that in my life. You know, I still remember so clearly standing at our wedding and saying that, you know, my parents and Anne's parents had just celebrated their 25th wedding anniversary. And in the short speech that I gave, over 15 minutes or something, I said that soon we're going to be celebrating our 25th wedding anniversary. Unknown to me, the pastor had written down Anne's birthday instead of our marriage date. And as a result, within less than a year, within 6 months of us getting married, we had been married for 25 years. So we had to change, we had to send things back and get it you know, organized again. But you know something? The 25 years of our marriage was like that. We're almost 30 years married now. It makes me realize that I'm going to be 75 before I know it. Life rushes by. It doesn't wait for you. You know, you can be looking and seeing the end. You might be like Billy Graham, and the end is only at 99. You got life in you today. Live it. Stop waiting. So you can move from an end to being a person who is envied. You can move like one of our members from being an employee to being an employer. I don't know what it is that's holding you back on this day. But just the last word, this. And I trust that you've been writing these words down. Your test can become your testimony. Stop complaining about the situation you're going through. Because you know, when you're going through a test, you're learning a great deal. Your tests prepare you for the next step. Everyone has had the opportunity in their life to look back, to reflect back, and say to themselves or to others, that was a blessing in disguise. Why do they say that? Because at the time of going through your trial, at the time of going through your test, you cannot see the value associated with that difficulty. But there comes a time in the future where you look back and you begin to tell people about the blessing in disguise. You begin to share with them, and you begin to encourage them by the journey that you went through. So if you feel like you're going through a test right now, be reminded, look back and see of all those times that you can say that was a blessing in disguise. Because this day may present itself to you as a curse. But 10 years from now, you're going to look back and say that was the best thing that ever happened to me. Has anybody had that statement said before? Absolutely. So, aren't we an amazing species, if you can call us a species? You could go, and I'll share a short testimony here, from homeless to Harvard. I remember sharing this story. I think Sandy was attending training in 2012. Reg was at that same training, December 2012. Because a few months earlier, I had received a testimony from a young man who grew up in Tanzania. He had spent time in Darfur, how do you say that? Anyway, somewhere there in Sudan, in the desert, in the Sahara. None of you have ever been there, I'm sure. He had spent time in a refugee camp there. His father had abandoned him and his mother. He was an alcoholic, the father. The mother was unemployed. Somehow, he was able to go to a good school in Tanzania through sponsorship or support from others. And Dr. Yona was giving a talk at his final farewell at the school. Dr. Yona happens to be a MAP4LIFE trainer and representative in Tanzania. And he talked about dreams and the importance of having a dream. And this young guy who'd come from this background where he was destined, as he writes in his testimony, destined to become a sugarcane seller in the rural streets of Tanzania, just like his other mates who had finished school. This young man goes up to Dr. Yona and tells him and shares his dream. He says, I want to study in America. Dr. Yona is interested in this concept, this thought, and sits down with the young man and they have a discussion. And he says, before you tell me your story again, I want you to think about it. And so this young man, Jack, sat there and Dr. Yona said to him, what is your dream? And then he elaborated a little bit. He wants to change Tanzania. And the way that he believes he can change Tanzania is going to study in America and get a good education. So Dr. Yona asked him a simple little question. He says, have you applied? None of my children had bursaries to go to university. Do you know why? They didn't apply. They believed that in South Africa they disqualified from getting a bursary. So they never applied. So therefore, they guaranteed that they would never get a bursary. And here was a young man done exactly the same thing. He had disqualified himself from ever getting to America because he felt he didn't qualify. He was from Tanzania with a widow, an abandoned mother who was unemployed. He'd never have the money to go. Do you know when he applied 2 weeks later, he was accepted? Not only was he accepted, but he had 100% scholarship. He wasn't just accepted anywhere, he was accepted at the Florida State University of Technology, which is where the NASA astronauts study. I can go through Jack's story, and maybe I should do it quickly. But he completed 2 degrees in his first year. After 6 months and getting 100% in every subject, he got one of the greatest recognitions that the university could give, and that was to give him the freedom to choose to be the president of any of the clubs at the university, and he got free food. And he chose to start his own club. And through that, he began a television program. He began to interview the billionaires in America. One of them said, you're wasting your time here because the lecturers can't teach you anything. You should be studying humanities, because he had heard what his dream was, to transform Tanzania. So the next year he went and did another 2 degrees. A study in humanities and political science, I think, were the subjects that he did. In July 2012, after he had presented his papers to the top 125 professors in America, not just his own dean, he'd presented his thesis, he had been interviewed on ABC News. In July, he sends me a short little thank you message. And he signs it, indicating that he's now studying international law, and he is the CEO of his own computer company, because he had studied in his first year computer science, and he was writing from Harvard University. You see, we sometimes allow our habitat to define our habits, and yet we dream about habitats that demand new habits, but we're not prepared to change our habit because it's our culture. And our very culture holds us trapped. And when I say culture, I'm talking about collection of habits. which, by the way, was imposed on you. I was saying to a group of people, I was doing a workshop the other day, I said, you know, you were colonized, every single one of you. You arrived on this planet, a free person, and immediately you arrived here. The people that you call your parents began to colonize you. They began to get you to speak their language, to eat their food, to live in their way of life. And now you claim it's yours. It's not yours. You could speak any language you choose. You could dress any way you want. In fact, you could even create your own language. That's what we have the ability to do. Maybe our habits that we hold on to so dearly and defend are the things that are keeping us where we are. This morning, you were invited, which is the letter I in this. You were invited here this morning. I've been invited to things as well, many times. You can walk out this room and into the world and tell people that you had been invited to attend a MAP talk. Or on this day, you could be inspired. And you could walk out this room into your mission field and go and transform lives. That's a choice that you and I get to make every day. A new day begins. The sun rises. Is it going to set on the same Sydney that awoke in Soweto in the morning? Or is the Sydney that goes to bed tonight going to be a new one? I don't know what your story is. I know that you were invited to be here today. I don't know whether you're going to step out there and be an inspiration. That's a choice that you make. That's a choice that I need to make. And I believe we can. The last letter is the letter S. Success, the thing that so many people strive for, I believe is simply a mask. Success is something that we strive for to hide who we really are. You see, I want to say to you this morning that you are so unique that there's never been somebody like you, and there never will be someone like you ever. And when you have something that is that unique, it is priceless. There's no one with your DNA. There's no one with the way you speak. They do things called voice recognition. They can read the retina at the back of your eye. All of these things are different, unique. They can pick out your face on Facebook, for goodness sake. You're looking over there and they're tagging you before you even know it. And somebody else took the photo. That's how unique you are. It doesn't confuse you with someone else. You are unique, a one of a kind. But yet we're striving to be successful, to try and be somebody else that the world expects us to be, and as a result we lose our identity. We become a copy. Born an original, dying copies. And desperate to do so. Success is overrated. You can have a bag of money, a bag of euros, a bag of dollars, a bag of pounds, a bag of bitcoins. I don't know what you might have, but you can have as much money as you like in the world. But it will end the day you end. It will be converted to what other people want it to be the day you're gone. But strive for significance. Die to self. Surrender to the person who created you. Allow him to do a work in your life and see your life not become a distant memory, but a living idea in the people for generations to come. You have the ability on a day like this to transform from chasing money to burying yourself so that you can grow into a tree in a forest. Because that's what significance is about. Significance is not about me, myself, and I, which is what success is about. Significance is about all the other people currently on the planet and who are yet to come. There are people that have not yet been born that are going to be influenced by the people who choose not to chase after things that are going to give them a name, but to realize that their name is on their flame. The thing that you are passionate about is the thing that people are going to get to know you about. People already say, Glen, not Glen McQuirk, Glen, the MAP4LIFE guy. So there's something about the name on your flame. When somebody's passionate, I think of that guy, Steve Irwin, watching a dung beetle cross the Kalahari sands in Botswana, with his big eyes right there while the dung beetle rolls a piece of cow dung or horse dung or buffalo dung or some stinky stuff across in front of the camera, and we sitting on the edge of our seat in our lounge watching this with absolute amazement, so much so that we run outside after the program to find ourselves a dung beetle. You see, passion does that. I read something very interesting yesterday at an education seminar. I talked about education not being about filling you up with water, but rather igniting the flame within. And it's creating a fire. That's what education's about. So if you leave today with something that's ignited inside of you, you've been educated. If you walk out here feeling like you've been dumped full of information, and you just got to get out here, then we've missed something. I'm not going to go back and run through all those letters again. I think you've all documented them. And for those of you who'd like a copy of this, please talk to the person who invited you, and I will get a copy, and you can get a copy of this presentation, and you're welcome to take it and share it with other people. Go and share the message. If you're watching this, send us an email and just ask us for the information, and we'll gladly send you a copy of the presentation. But I want to close with one last thing, and maybe just a couple words to recap, which I may have not talked about. But clearly, obstacles can turn to opportunities, Sandy. Feeling alone can turn to being accepted and being part of a family. Your desperation can turn to your destiny. Feeling lost, if you turn around, look, and you'll see a light. Okay, maybe there's one there. And your trials can turn into triumphs. But we've talked about a message this morning which simply says, on a day like this. I want to change that. And I want to ask this question to you and say, on a day like today, what is going to be your story? I don't know your circumstance. You know your circumstance. But circumstances have come to go. There's a possibility that you're going to one day refer back to the 3rd of March 2018, and you're going to say, on a day like today, I made a choice. And that choice which I made impacted the lives of people globally. How can I say that? Well, there's a clear command given to every created thing. All you have to do is go and read the first page in the Bible. So just go, go into the shop if you don't have one. Just go and pick up a Bible, read the first page and close it. But in that first page, you will see a story of creation. And on the 26th verse to the 28th verse, there's two statements made, and both statements are about the same thing. And it's about a commission that's given to you and I. And that commission is to be fruitful. In other words, replicate something after yourself. This is not only focusing on procreating, in other words, having children. It's about saying to you, there's a seed placed within you that has the potential to vegetate the planet. So I'm creating you to go into all the earth You're not too old to travel, and neither are you too young to travel. And I'm not talking about changing suburbs in your lifetime or from one generation to another, or changing cities. You've got the planet. It's within your DNA. Cut down or cut a branch off a tree and it starts sprouting new leaves. You can dig out weeds your whole life long, they just keep coming back up because they don't know what to do other than what they were commissioned to do, and that is to be fruitful and multiply and vegetate the planet. You and I have been given that same commission. That is why every dream that you have is beyond what is termed possible. Every dream that you have looks impossible. Why? Because there's a God that created you and He put inside of you the ability to do the impossible. And so on a day like today, you and I need to begin to act on the dreams that we've been given. We need to exercise that which we are passionate about. We need to put a plan together and begin to act on that plan. The longer you sit on your rusty dusty, the more chance you have of that idea rotting in a grave and never seeing the light of day. So on that stinky note, I want to say to you that on a day like today, that which you thought was impossible has already been done. I trust that this message has meant something to you, that it has triggered something inside of you, that a seed has germinated, a seed that one day will become a tree and for other people to see and to shelter under and eventually become a forest. It's not too late. If you are breathing, you have something of value to deliver. Let's make that happen on a day like today. Thank you very much. I think it's important maybe just to ask a question. What has been triggered in you today? Has anybody got something that you believe has been stirred up inside of you that you'd like to share? I know we're South African. In South Africa, we're very polite. You know, we let everyone else go first before me. You know, the last thing that I'm going to do is to volunteer. Ladies first. There you go. We like to use that one. Age before beauty, maybe some would say. Were you inspired this morning? Was anybody inspired? It's pretty okay. So you're all inspired. Now I want to hear what was it inside of you that was awakened this morning? Has anybody got something that was awakened? I can just stand and listen. Yes, Charles.
It's like a quick introduction.
No, you don't have to. Just tell us what was awakened inside of you. Charles is from Davidton. If anybody knows who that is.
Yes, from Davidton. I work in Africa amongst the very poor. But MAP4LIFE is part of the solution. So what you encouraged me today with is yes, it can. It can go through the whole of Africa. And if they can use it in their schools, they can use it in churches, they can use it in the mission field because it works.
Amen.
So think big.
Wonderful. Charles is doing a great work down in the East Rand, and I see there's people that are joining MAP4LIFE as a result of your work. So, well done, Charles. Great to have you here this morning. Yeah, come on, don't be shy. Yes, Sandy. Tell us. Why don't you come stand next to me? Maybe I should have said that to Charles, and at least we can perhaps pick up a little bit of sound.
So I'm inspired by, every time I come to talk by you, the message is so simple. And I was inspired by this image that you painted of standing in front of the glass door, where you can see the picture on the other side. and the key is in my hand, literally. I mean, I'm a food grower as a hobby. So when I get back home later, I'm going to be in the garden. And I've had this idea of a tool for farmers and for food growers, because I attend a farmer's school as well, using the MAP4LIFE as a tool for people, because that's where people are struggling, is to convert food growing into a business. So I've got everything on paper, like Glen has got in the bottom drawer. And when I've seen the tool that the AEE has got put together, I think I'm just going to knock on your door now and ask you to do that. So it can be shared with thousands of farmers in the country that are struggling to convert their businesses into viable farms.
Wonderful, Sandy. That's exciting. So I mean that's something that's been birthed a while ago. It wasn't birthed today, but today is the day of action. So well done, Sandy. That's exciting to hear. So food lovers, it's going to happen. Yes, come on. Who else? Sydney. Sydney comes all the way from the south of Joburg, and him and I met for the first time this morning. Although
Yes.
You want to tell a bit of your story before you tell us what?
Yes. Oh, my name is Signi Mabuza. I'm from Soweto. I'm a Christian. I'm a born-again Christian. One of my spiritual leaders, he once told us that before you buy a book or anything, you must pray and ask God for guidance. So I never bought a book in my life before. But in lunchtime, when I was working by then at Clicks Pharmacy, I'll go to exclusive books. So I'll see this book called MAP4LIFE. Then I'll pray, say, Lord, I don't know which book to read, but I love this book, MAP4LIFE. And then I'll go there on lunchtime, sit down, read the book. And then I say, end of the month, when I get paid, I think this is the book I should buy for myself. And indeed, I did that for myself, and I'm happy. Today...
That was in 2003?
3 years.
2003.
I'll carry that book wherever I go with me, and it really changed my life. And then I'll use some of in that book, I think I'll get one for myself right now. Glen will put some messages from other motivational speakers. I'll also use that as my motto or my philosophy as well to inspire other people. So I went for an interview. They asked me, what motivates you or what inspires you? 3 words. Then I remember in that book, MAP4LIFE, there was hard work, perseverance, but most of all, self-discipline. But I was still young, I was 26 years, but they hired me. I didn't understand, but now wherever I go, I carry that weight with me. Because it's very, very important. You can work hard, you can have perseverance and make millions or change people's life. But if you don't have self-discipline, you can lose that thing in a moment. So today, what inspires me, or what you have, whatever thing that was in me, is that wherever I go from today, I will expect good things in my life. I will, as you have mentioned, that on this day, obstacles can become your opportunity.
Yeah.
By the end of this day, I am expecting a good thing to happen in my life. I'm no longer going to be negative or attract negative things, but I always smile and expect good things in my life. But above everything, good things is not money, as Glen has mentioned, but to change people's life, to make someone to smile and realize on this day, they can maybe have diabetic or blood pressure, but they can receive a healing and believe. And then this other one, it really changed me today, Glen, because on Wednesday, I'm meeting one of the richest, I can say, people who control the economy in our country. They are called Masingita Holdings. They're there in Killarney Mall. They own Jabulani Mall, Deep Sloot Mall, and then they just built a 5-star hotel in Sandton. They've got a lot of properties. So I was afraid. I said, who I am to meet, a chairman or a CEO, and then I'm going with my colleagues as consultants. And then I was afraid. But today, you took out that fear, that when you take action, all fears disappear. So I am going to stand in that door, and I will get closer, and I will knock, and I say, my name is Signi, I'm here to take what belongs to me. And then that's what I'm going to do. So that fear has disappeared.
Amen, amen.
So I want to thank you for it. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sydney. Thanks for sharing that. It's so exciting to meet somebody who's been a MAP4LIFE user for 15 years, and there's going to be so many stories like that. I hope, have you all, okay, you're going to take your story home. What I would like you to do is to write it down. Maybe before you leave, if you want to, actually write it on a piece of paper and leave it. I would like to see what it is that you've decided to do. Maybe write it down twice. Keep a copy for yourself and leave a copy there for me. Because I would like to be able to say one day, you know, there was a person who attended a talk, and in that talk, without anybody knowing, without anybody being aware of it, they made a choice and a decision that resulted in the influence that you and I experience today in the world. And that can happen for you. So today has been a wonderful time. If there are people here who are interested in some of the MAP4LIFE stuff, you can take a look on the table, help yourself to some of those tools, but there needs to be an exchange of some kind. So Jordan will help with the exchange. We don't have a lot of stock here, so you can order and we can get it to you. There's also an opportunity to become a member of MAP4LIFE, and if you're interested in becoming a member, just chat to me or chat to some of our trainers. You know, there's Charles, Sandy, let me look around quickly, Minar, Marvin, Reg. If I've missed anybody, forgive me. But you can ask them questions as well. They've been through the training with MAP4LIFE, so they can answer your questions. I think today has been a significant day, and I appreciate you being here. I would like to get to know you well, and that means I need to see you every month, not kind of once in a while. So April, the first Saturday of April is the week after Easter, I believe. So if you're going away, I understand, but I do know there's enough time to cancel your holiday now. So lovely to have you here. When we say same venue, the facility here will be the same. We usually meet in another venue downstairs, but today there was another function that had booked out the two venues. But it will be at Safari Lodge. So if you follow our signs, follow your nose, look for the food, I think you'll find us. Okay. Great, guys. You're welcome to chat a bit if you like before you go. I've really enjoyed the morning. Thank you for coming. And that was that all this good information had not produced action. For 10 years, I'd been listening and telling other people about the great talk I went or the great book that I read, but I was sitting there not applying anything. And you see, what I realized as I was going through these 10 years of recordings was that people were saying the same kind of thing. The speakers, the books that I was reading, the videos I was watching, were all saying a similar kind of message. They were giving a kind of a formula that we should apply to achieve our dreams and goals, but no one provided the tool. And I was, by the end of going through these files, there's a place of frustration. I was angry at myself for not having done anything. Has anybody ever felt that way before? You know, you kind of look back on your life and you say, if only I did that back in 1971, as my father used to say. Just look where we would be today. Interestingly, I've just realized for the first time that 1971 was my dad's 30th birthday. And you know, when you turn 30, there's a very significant thing that happens to that. So for those of you who are about to turn 30, remember that it's an important time in your life. And that's the day when your ministry begins. So I must tell my dad about that. Where was I? Just get back. You know, I was frustrated at this point. And I made a decision that morning that I'm no longer going to be the person who puts things off till the perfect time. Because for 10 years, the perfect time had not come. And so that morning, I decided that I was going to put together the tool that everybody was talking about, a kind of a manual for myself, so that I could begin to implement that which all these people were talking about. And you know something? As I had that thought, I suddenly wondered if there were any other people that were in the same situation that I was in, that were also frustrated, sick and tired of not implementing and taking action. And you know what the answer was when I thought? that great thought was, yes, there have to be many other people just like me in a place of procrastination, hoping that their dreams are going to come true without ever taking the first step. And so I began, and that became my Y2K project. When I say Y2K, it was my Millennium Project. I knew this is only the second time, was it the second time in the history, well, at least in the past 2,000 years, that we were going to roll over from one millennium into another. I mean, how could you miss this opportunity? So I put on the cover of this book that I was going to put together, I said it's going to be called the Millennium Edition. I mean, nobody else is going to have the opportunity to do that. And I began feverishly working on this new idea. Has anybody ever had an idea that inspired you to take action? I mean, you lie awake at night because all you can think about is this great idea that you have. Well, that was me. I worked 18 hours a day, non-stop. This was on a Friday morning. Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You know what happened on Sunday? Evening, at about 10 p.m., my nose began to run. I began to feel sorry for myself. My eyes began to water. I got the cold, I just got a cold. The next morning I was lying curled up in my bed. And I don't know if you ever feel that way, but I was feeling sorry for myself. I took that pile of paper that I generated in the previous 3 times 18, whatever that is, 54 hours. So you can imagine, I had this pile of paper, I created another file. And I took that file, and guess where I put it? In the same filing cabinet at the back of all the files. And that's where it stayed. I just had a revelation that could change the world in my mind at that point. And here, after just 54 hours on the project, just 3 days later, a common cold causes me to take a world-changing idea and put it back into the bottom shelf. Now, I might be the only person on the planet that does those kind of things. But you know something? I had just put a dream potentially to death in that moment. And it took 6 months before I woke up. And it was 6 months later when I was there in Minar's world, at least I think he tells me, the Scottish world, is that right? Somewhere, the Irish, I'm kind of, you know, sorry, I'm Irish now. And there I was in Scotland on a cold August evening. They said it was summer. I'm telling you, it was worse than our winter. But there I was in their summer, sitting up in this room, you know, freezing. But at least outside was freezing, inside was okay. And we were busy having a coffee chat. When I say coffee chat, you know that small talk, you sit around a table, I mean, we're in the lounge, talking about nonsense. You know that kind of talk that you normally have when friends come around. And Rob McAleer, the guy that we were visiting, said 2 words. And those 2 words were just, if only. I can't remember what our discussion that evening was about at all. All I remember were those 2 words. Because when he said those 2 words, I was instantly transported back to my hometown of East London. And I was sitting as a teenager in the car with my father in the sort of back seat, driving down Amalinda Main Road. And there was a 90-degree bend at the end of the street. And every time we took that 90-degree bend, my dad would point to a piece of property and it said, if only we bought that piece of ground back in 1971, look where we would be today. And here I am in Glasgow, Scotland, and this guy says, if only. And I realized here, like father, like son, I had taken an idea and I'd put it back into the drawer, potentially never to take it out again. I could see myself already being to my children the same as my father was to me, and saying to them, if only I followed through on the idea that I was given back in 1999, look where we would be today as a family. And so this morning, before we get into the talk today, I experienced something like that on a day like this. And each one of you sitting here this morning can relate to what I just said. Because there are things in your life that you have taken and put in that bottom drawer because you believed it wasn't possible. Or you allowed circumstances in your life at that point to keep you from following through. Or you found someone else or something to blame to justify why you couldn't do it. I just think here in South Africa today, so many people in South Africa have been blaming the president for their inaction. I wonder if those people are now going to start doing something. Or if they're going to find a new president to blame. Because you see, it's easy for us to blame other people because we think that makes us look better. I want to tell you this morning that anybody or anything that you blame has absolute and complete authority over your life. You cannot change as long as you blame someone else for your circumstances. And so, on a day like this, there are people that make choices that change the world. And there are the majority of people who make choices to take the treasure that is placed inside of them to the grave and bury it forever. I want to invite you today that when we do, and when I share the message with you this morning, I want to invite you not to be the person who takes the treasure to the grave, but rather the person who brings out that treasure and places it in the hearts of people. Because when you do that, we won't need a tombstone to remember you, like most people have today. You will be